Great. So sawadika and good afternoon. It's really an honor to be here today to kick off the afternoon session where we'll start talking about risks and opportunities in the transition to net zero. So, I know this is a very knowledgeable group, but I thought I would still start this conversation with two things that we know for sure, right? So we know that there is an exponential increase in climate change risks. And at the same time, we know that there's also an exponential increase in the kinds of technologies that can help us address these risks. And you have to ask yourself, does this make you an optimist or a pessimist about our ability in Thailand or globally to move along the transition to net zero? So I'm new. And I have to apologize for not speaking in Thai. I arrived about a month and a half ago to run our World Bank regional hub and our program in Thailand. But I have to say most of my conversations since I arrived this summer have been about the transition to net zero, have been about technologies, policies, risks and opportunities on the climate change agenda. And so I feel like, in general, Thailand and everyone working here are choosing to be optimists. But we also need to be realists, right? And I want to thank the conference and the Nation Group for bringing forward this topic about how we can be realists to address both the risks and the opportunities. Okay. So, for Thailand to meet its goals of carbon neutrality by 2050 and net zero emissions by 2065, that means that emissions need to reduce by 30% by 2030, which the way time flows is almost tomorrow. And so that's why having this conference is so important. And meeting these national emissions reduction goals will require a combination of carbon pricing, supporting investments, and also policy reforms. And that also means some trade-offs. Trade-offs between speed, trade-offs between increasing local investment versus international investment, and also finding ways for the transition to be just. Because a just transition and not leaving behind the vulnerable populations that remain in parts of Thailand will also make this transition more sustainable. So in the World Bank in Thailand, we have a regional hub for global knowledge and partnerships. And we've actually organized our entire program around this topic. We've launched these 3 platforms, some with government and some with the private sector, to support this work that you're all talking about today, with technical assistance, financing, and analysis. So these are our 3 platforms. They should ring very familiar to everyone here: sustainable finance, sustainable cities, and innovation. We also, this year, are working with the Thai government and with businesses to do what we call a country climate and development report. So this is one of the World Bank's flagship reports that we do all around the world. And the idea is to provide the modeling and analytics that can help government in developing policies and also help investors in making the decisions about where and how they invest in Thailand. Also, coming in just 2 years, Thailand has chosen to host the World Bank IMF annual meetings. So this is like a Davos, or an economic Olympics, where every bigwig working on economic issues around the world will be coming to Thailand. And so this also becomes an opportunity to showcase, both from the government side and the private sector side, some of the innovations that are happening here in Thailand. So back to this main topic that we're kicking off for the afternoon, which is around the risks and opportunities in transition. Let me suggest a framework which is a bit of an intersection of the 4 key parts of this analysis: financing and economic, both risk and opportunity; climate and physical, the stuff we actually feel and experience; regulatory; and then also technology solutions. And I thought we could just quickly go through these because I know our afternoon sessions are going to focus a lot on this intersection. So the first area on finance. So it looks a little bit complicated because that is because it's meant to show us the opportunities that are here. We do a lot of work on this as the World Bank Group, globally and especially in Thailand. And our estimates suggest that transitioning Thailand to net zero could cost a staggering 11 trillion baht. Now, for some high-income economies, it could be possible to make this transition entirely through credits and incentives. But we know that here, and in many other places like Thailand that are quite advanced, but still need to make this jump, you're going to need a combination of market-based solutions. But what this is showing is that the good news is that we estimate that there's $632 billion of climate finance potential. And if Thailand can pull together into this intersection of the different aspects of the transition and leverage this, it's clear that Thailand can unlock funds and accelerate this transition. So now, what do we mean when we're talking about sustainable finance? A bit of a transition from the morning session into the afternoon. So we've been committed to and providing assistance in helping the government work through to unlock green, blue, and carbon sources of financing. So we're working closely with the Department of Climate Change and Environment to design effective carbon pricing instruments. And so this means a mix of standards and compulsory mechanisms like carbon taxes and emissions trading schemes. And the revenues generated can go into climate-friendly green investment incentives that can accelerate the progress towards net zero. Then there's also voluntary international carbon markets. So we estimate that creating mechanisms like aggregating small reduction interventions and selling carbon credits to the international market, like rooftop solar across cities in Thailand. One of the first things I did in my first month was to go around and see some of the cities in Bangkok, but also other cities where it would be possible to do this sort of aggregation and unlock the markets. This could result in up to $1.5 billion of 10-year offset monetary value, right? This creates a foundation in which to scale up the investments and to really accelerate this progress. Because all those years I mentioned at the start, 2030, basically tomorrow, 2050, it's coming around the corner. So acceleration becomes important. Otherwise, the risk of inaction will just push us back further. The second part of that intersection, right, the intersection of the four pieces of a transition framework, is the physical bit, the part that we see and feel and experience wherever we live. And we know Thailand is highly vulnerable to climate impacts. There was the heat wave in April. We're seeing these terrible floods in Chiang Rai and in the north. And we know about the growing regional air pollution issues. So we're seeing an impact and an actual cost to people, to the economy, and to the environment. So last year also in our economic monitor, we estimated that another severe flood could wipe out more than 12% of Thailand's GDP. When we're talking about risks, like that's a very serious risk. And the reality is that building this resilience is not just a climate issue. It's an economic issue at the macro level for the government and for investors and businesses that are here. Because we also know that potential investors are watching this very carefully. And so investors thinking about how their assets are protected are assessing plans and preparedness in Thailand and in other countries as they're making their decisions about where to put the call center, where to put the advanced technology manufacturing. And they may not come to a particular place if another place is offering more of a preparedness plan and an acceleration. But Thailand is doing a lot of work on this, actually. And I want to talk about perhaps one of the more overlooked opportunities for accelerating along this transition when we're thinking about these risks and opportunities. And this is with the cities. So in July, actually, when I first arrived, we put out our latest economic monitor. And it was talking about sustainable cities and highlighting how strategic investment in urban infrastructure can both fuel decarbonization and resilience. and create cities that are more sustainable, livable, and competitive. And so private sector mobilization for low-carbon, transit-oriented development, which I know is the topic of our next sessions in the afternoon, could generate $2 billion annually for this type of urban infrastructure. But it's not just about the volume. It's also about better infrastructure. So the discussions about electric buses, about more metro lines, about reducing the carbon emissions from transport are one of the highest sources of carbon emissions in Thailand. By looking at multiple cities and at investment opportunities across Thailand, this is also a way to diversify, right? To spread out from a concentration risk of having growth being based solely or predominantly in Bangkok, but spreading this risk through transit-oriented development and growing in a more balanced and sustainable manner. Now, the third part of this intersection is the regulatory bit. And traditionally, this is the part that also the World Bank does a lot of work with our member countries. So here in Thailand, as I mentioned, we're working on helping the government with already very forward-leaning plans on encouraging investment, and particularly making market access for new technologies open to all players. This is really important. That's the internal Thailand part of it. And Thailand will feature in the World Bank's Be Ready Index, which is sort of the follow-on to the Doing Business Index, in 2026. And so preparing and thinking this through and also communicating this to investors in Thailand is an important piece. But there's also the global piece as well. And the EU CBAM is a live example of these new standards that Thailand will need to meet. This is about building carbon competitiveness, right? Accessing also the global markets. And the last piece of this intersection, the 4 parts, is around technology. I mean, this is where the innovation needs to come and is coming in order to beat that exponential curve of climate impacts. There's the exponential hope of increasing technologies and having many of them grown here in Thailand and investing in Thailand, particularly low-carbon tech solutions in the power sector. There's a price incentive to move towards renewable energy that comes up against what's a structure in Thailand's power market that's based on fossil fuels. So shifting that becomes very important. And moving along the innovation scale is also very important. Our next economic monitor that comes out in January will focus on this question, on innovation, on boosting entrepreneurs and SMEs in the green space and across the economy. So this is actually a picture that I took, just to conclude. And so this is a piece of graffiti art that I saw walking with my family on what was a really, really interesting urban art tour in Bangkok a couple of weeks ago. So why am I showing this here? This is art that was done, graffiti, right, using a spray paint can. And it reminded me of a talk that I saw at a Financial Times event a while ago, where the speaker was saying, when we're talking about changes in the climate and also changes in technology, this is something that the world has worked on before with some success. So I'm old enough to remember back in the 80s, when as a student, we were all really concerned about the growing hole in the ozone. But everybody was also really concerned that if we were going to fix the hole in the ozone, we were going to lose our refrigerators, our air conditioners, our spray paint cans for doing graffiti, and our hairspray, which in the 80s, you know, everybody had big hair. So this was a concern. But the point of showing this is the world actually got together with the Montreal Protocol and stopped using CFCs. And Thailand actually was part of that. Thailand remains, I think, the second largest exporter of refrigeration, right? ACs and refrigerators. So this just shows that it is possible for new technologies to come in, to be supported by policy, and also for people's lives to continue on a growth path. That this is not about sacrifice per se. It's about shifting the curve. And so I know this afternoon we're going to talk in more detail about some of these risks and opportunities, particularly around transportation, infrastructure. And as we're thinking about that, there are definitely risks with this. But now's the time also to really move towards these opportunities that I see here in Thailand, both with the government and with investors, and to really move towards this shift of the transition to net zero. So thanks very much, and I look forward to participating.
Thank you very much. So Ms. Melinda, so please remain on the stage.
Sorry?
Could you please remain on the stage and we want to let's talking a little bit more about this topic.
Do you need the slides? Okay.
Yes, all right. So please.
Sure.
Oh, we are honored to be here with you on the stage for today, and you're from a World Bank, so that we all know that climate change is not only for our world, but it's about economic also.
Right.
What's about purpose for in early or in the next year? What you want to do for World Bank together with this world?
Yeah. So as I was saying, the main thing at this point is to keep everything moving in parallel. So the Thai government is working on policies to increase competition, the Climate Change Act, to build carbon pricing systems, right? Both the compulsory in carbon tax and in emissions trading schemes, but also the voluntary. And this is where, by having a carbon market, there's opportunities for businesses and investors to help shift this curve. So for us, this is a big focus.
Yes, me too. We are true. And we are in this event or in this room also like that. และแน่นอนค่ะคุณเมลินดานะคะก็ได้อย่างที่บอกทุกท่านไปนะคะว่าวันนี้เธอมาแชร์ในมุมของ World Bank แล้วเนี่ยเรื่องของ climate change เนี่ยไม่ได้เพียงแค่มีผลกระทบกับโลกเราเท่านั้นเมื่อมีสิ่งต่างๆเปลี่ยนแปลงไปภาวะโลกร้อนค่ะสิ่งแรกเลยที่จะกระทบก็คือเรื่องของเศรษฐกิจค่ะคุณนันแล้วก็สิ่งเหล่านี้ก็เป็นสิ่งที่สะท้อนให้เห็นว่าปัจจุบันทางภาครัฐโดยเฉพาะประเทศไทยเองค่ะก็มีการส่งเสริมแล้วก็มีนโยบายต่างๆออกมามากมายเพื่อสนับสนุนให้พวกเรานะคะมาใส่ใจแล้วก็เห็นแล้วก็ตระหนักถึงเรื่องนี้มากขึ้น so let's talking a little bit about the CFC right so just now you talk we just know we only put you just spray hairspray that is have some effect on the earth so what do you think about that so let's could you please tell a little bit more and invite people to save this world.
So that was an old example. My point of using that example from the Montreal Protocol in the 1980s was it was a problem where the world found a technology and governments did policy in order to stop that particular problem. So the point of that example is to show that it can be done. But like I said at the beginning, the climate change impacts are exponentially growing compared to the 1980s. And so the technologies are becoming exponentially more complex, which means that we have to hurry up and keep moving the policy interventions that will allow for the growth of these technologies, including here in Thailand, to address what's coming to us now, right? There's no time to waste. But it doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah, thank you so much and thank you for coming ขอเสียงปรบมือดังๆให้คุณเมลินดาด้วยนะคะ
ถ้าชอบกดไลค์ใช่กดแชร์และอย่าลืมกดติดตามทุกช่องทางของฐานเศรษฐกิจด้วยนะคะ